are rapping on Anderson Street today about sexual stigmas and taboos. It's fiery, it's exciting, I like it. The laughter was high. I mean, the personal stories are excellent. Is it safe for work? No. If you're my parents, go to the next episode. Let's just be real. We just don't want to talk about these things. Nonetheless, some things I want you to think about in the audience, at your own tables, you know? Did you have the birds and the bees conversation with adults of any sort? What was that like? What if you didn't have it? Did you need it? Any beliefs on the norms of sex, sexuality, masculinity, femininity? What is it? Is it fluid? Is it not? What's the deal? And, you know, do you have a list? Some of you know that, you know, when I lost my virginity at 15, I ended up in the hospital and I died twice. And I'd lost 6 pints of blood in an hour. So this was, you know, blood transfusion necessary, blood pressure didn't change, so I couldn't get a transfusion actually. And my mom was right by my side and she was whispering to me, I remember, and I had, you know, out-of-body experience, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a teaching hospital, so there's tons of doctors in the room. There's like 10 people in the room and they're bustling back and forth. And they were like, well, did she have sex? Did you have sex? And I was like, oh my God, no, absolutely not. I don't have sex at all. I don't do that. I don't do that. I was 15, right? My mom is there. And I just think back to that all the time because what could have happened if the people in the room knew what happened, that I had 6 inches of my arterial wall torn open by a weapon of mass destruction.
You could have probably gotten healed quicker.
Way quicker. Could have gone to therapy at all. Like,
right
oh my
away.
God, so many things could have been alleviated as a result. And that's probably the biggest norm that I can think of, is that sex doesn't happen really. That's what I was taught in my household by its complete omission. Didn't ever hear that. My parents didn't have sex ever. They just had me once, so they must have had sex one time. That's what I know to be true. Not till today, obviously, but so, you know, I guess they're out here. I don't know. Sorry, Mom. So, you know, I'm interested, Taryn, in like an experience of yours, cultural norm, sexual norm.
Yeah, I mean, just like related to that, not being able to talk about it, I didn't understand hormones when they started. So like when I started forming like boobs and hips.
When was that?
Probably 11 or 12. But like, I was raised Southern Baptist, right? So sex is just like wrong no matter what. And so then I felt like I was a sinner just for having a sexual body.
Right.
So I started to really hate myself for it. And then I'd be watching movies where like the couple's making out and I'd start to feel things down there, which is a bad thing, right? And at the time I was like, I feel like I have to pee. Like I didn't understand it, but I knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong. So then it really grew into a really destructive road where I was hurting myself because I thought I was a sinner for thinking sexually.
Oh no. Like mentally hurting yourself.
Physically hurting myself.
Yeah.
Because I was a sinner and I had to change it. And so like that's, from not talking about it, what happens. And so like that was, you know, not okay.
No.
Because I work with women, I'm a coach for women, and they are so out of touch with their bodies because they haven't allowed the exploration because they felt either shame about their bodies or religious upbringings or things that men have said to them. And I want to start conversating about the norms of female sexuality and what that looks like versus what you read on the cover of Cosmo, because that's bullshit.
No, that's not okay.
No, and that was like the start of like a very destructive road with my sexual life, and so.
So you come from a very strong religious background.
Yeah, so Southern Baptist is like
one of the strongest.
It's like they just wave over your head like you're gonna go to hell if you do anything.
So there's a lot of guilt.
A lot of guilt.
Shame.
Yeah, a lot of shame. So, and then you're like a female as well. So like you know, as females in the church, you don't really have a right to say things or speak up. So I never saw women in like a power figure leadership. So that also like always had me like questioning myself pretty young.
So I don't know, my experience was really different. I don't know if it's because my mom had me when she was really young, like not really young. She had me when she was like 20. She gave birth to me. But sex was something that was welcomed. Like I think I told you guys all this already, but she would let me, like when we would go to friends' house and like houses and sex scenes would be on the TV, she would not say anything. She would allow me to watch them, but then if war scenes came on or fighting scenes or just really mean scenes, she would turn it off or fast forward it or pause it. And her friends really never understood. I was always really grateful. I was like, ooh, what's happening? This is exciting.
Right.
And then she would say, that sex is natural, and she shouldn't feel bad about it. War is something I would not like her to become very familiarized with. So,
So your mom spoke to you about...
That's what's interesting. I don't really recall any direct conversations about sex, but it was never hidden. And it's all around us, really, like constantly. In advertisements, movies, and she just never covered my eyes. I'm sure I would ask questions, but my mom is she's, again, she was a little bit younger, so like when I was like 7 or 8 and just like exploring these things, she was like 27. So she would, just talk to me like, kind of really frankly about it. And when I first got my period, she was like, sent me this, she wasn't home at the time, she sent me like this gigantic box of all these books about like women's sexuality and like going through stuff.
That's
and stuff.
Amazing.
No, yeah, but it was interesting because I was raised with my grandparents, which was a totally different vibe towards sex.
Clearly.
But
Great Depression era.
yeah, but
Got it.
yeah,
Right.
Great Repression era.
Next.
Just kidding.
Great one.
But she but she made it like a comfortable, natural thing. So I never really felt any, besides like peer stuff. That's where most of the trauma and the guilt came from. Actually, it was more peer related.
Oh yeah.
Than family related.
Oh yeah, like I was molested around that time too, around 12, 13. And my girlfriends were like, well, what did you do?
No,
Yep.
it's wrong.
And it wasn't their fault. They were raised to think that it was my fault as well. Like, they weren't bad friends for saying that, but that was their first reaction, was like, well, you must have been flirting too much. And I carried that for a long time, thinking it was my fault,
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Do guys get birds and bees talks?
Or do you just get condoms?
Well, I'll be honest. So, and it's funny. I remember, I guess it's like a preteen, like 11, 12, 13, waiting for that talk. Because, like, at that age, you hear about, like, oh, my parents talked to me about the birds and the bees and this and that. And it never happened for me. And when I was 15, I got my first blowjob from a girl. I'll never forget, it was Super Bowl. It was in the bathroom. It was halftime.
You'll never forget.
My buddy's
You'll never forget, though.
I don't remember.
Who's playing?
Good night.
Listen, I don't remember who was performing.
Don't remember none of that.
I don't remember who was performing at halftime, but I enjoyed halftime. But
I wonder if she enjoyed halftime.
funny thing is, I remember a few days after, I was on the phone with this girl, and back before there were cell phones, and like she called my house. So I was 15. I was born in '85, so it's I guess the year 2000. And I remember my father picked up on the other line, and I don't know why he picked up the phone, if he knew I was on the phone or, whatever the case may be. And he heard me talking to this girl, and he heard my father heard us talking about how she gave me head in the bathroom of the Super Bowl during halftime. Didn't say anything to me. So me and my father used to go. So this, I guess, was on a Friday night.
Yikes.
Me and my father would go out for breakfast every Saturday morning.
Good night.
So cute.
We go to the diner, and I never forget, we're in the diner, and he looks at me and he's like, I picked up the phone last night when you were on the phone. So I'm sorry, what?
Right. You're like, I wasn't on the phone.
So then he looks at me and was like, who were you talking to? I said, I was talking to my friend. Why? So he goes, I was going to hang up, but I heard you talking, and I listened, and he said something, I don't remember exactly, to the effect of, I'm a little disappointed in you. I was a little bit confused because I assumed he'd be like, give me a high five, that's
Right.
my son. Something to that effect. And he looked at me and he said, did you use protection? And I said, Dad, no, I just got a blowjob.
Oh, no.
We didn't have sex.
You're like, I'm winning this one.
But
Right.
he said,
It was fine.
and this is what was kind of weird to me, kind of looking back on it in hindsight, and he's like, yeah, I know.
You were like, I didn't learn
But
that.
he said, did you wear a condom with, And that's when I was a little confused. And I said, Dad, I get it, I'm 15, but people wear condoms when they get blowjobs? So he then explained to me, you have to be safe and this and that. And that's how it kind of precipitated into my conversation of the birds and the bees. But God, that was the most embarrassing, most uncomfortable conversation I ever had. And it made me think, like, when over breakfast nonetheless. It was Eggs Benedict will never be the same. But it's funny because I thought to myself, when I have kids, if I have a son, I will never talk to my son in that manner. Like, I'm gonna talk with him when he's younger, but I'm not gonna get mad at him. I'm not gonna make him feel uncomfortable. I'm gonna almost talk to him as an equal and let him know, like, hey, it's okay. So kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and it made me feel uncomfortable. So, and this, I might be different in the sense where I always talked about sex with my mom and not my dad, and I think that's different than the societal norm of most straight men.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It made me uncomfortable with my dad, so I always talked about sex with my mom. I talked about girls I slept with and whatever. So yeah, that was.
Why do you think that like played a role in like your sex life, like talking with your woman about it versus talking with a male figure?
I think it made me a little bit more sensitive.
Yeah.
In some ways with women, not to say that I was an angel towards women, a lot of times when I was younger, but I think it made me able to understand women a little bit better and what their feelings are, and to treat them with care and be a little bit more gentle, maybe as opposed to if I was kind of taught that like by my father, being a male figure. So it's hard for me to say because I only know one way, but at the same time, it's that was my normal. And funny, it was a couple months after, and I kind of can't hold back from telling the story because I just so
Go in.
And I'm just gonna blurt it out. I lost my virginity a couple months later. I was the first one of my friends, and I lost it on camera.
We're in it now.
So
okay. That's real.
That's real. Crazy story. I was with my good friend at the time, who I got my first blowjob in his bathroom, and
good friend.
A good friend. So he was friends with a lot of girls. I was shy when I was in high school. I was small. I was skinny. I was shy, and he would talk to girls almost for me. So, and he was talking to this girl who I grew up with, and it's funny, I probably never spoke 2 words to her in the years from elementary school to high school. And she was like, yeah, I just broke up with my boyfriend, who was like 19, we were 15. And she's like, I really want to have sex, I haven't had sex in a while. And he was like, oh, would you want to have sex with my friend Ben? And she was like, all right, I'm game. And this was on the weekend. She was like, yeah, tell him to come over on Monday after school. And this was set up like a business meeting.
Wow.
This was not like typical. It wasn't. It was like looking back, and it was super weird. I'll never forget it. I had in-school suspension that day. I don't even remember what I was in trouble for, but I had in-school suspension. I'm in 10th grade, and all day I knew I'm about to lose my virginity after school.
Wow.
So
all the magic.
And you were like
taken away.
It was.
That's so interesting.
Yeah,
Why
it was
do you
weird.
think we treat sex like? Because I remember it being like kind of transactional in the, like when I first became familiarized with it, like in a personal way. And what is it societally that like makes it like all the magic? It's like so strange. It's like a job. It's like okay, we have turned 15 now. We have a job to do.
Yeah.
Like what is that?
Yeah. And I remember I almost like kind of felt a sense of responsibility because I was like, I'm gonna do this because none of my boys have had sex yet. Like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna let them know how it is.
An American sexual norm is there's a power element to it, like an ego element. It kind of isn't as romantic as it is in other cultures that I'm familiar with.
These 2 girls who will go unmentioned were a year older than me. They were in-school suspension with me. It was like in the library in a room. And I told them, I'm supposed to have sex after school.
Supposed to.
So I don't drive yet. You girls are older. You have your license. I don't have a way to get to her house. So they were like, oh my God, that's so cute. Of course we'll drive you. You're so nice.
Oh.
These girls drove me after school with my buddy to this girl's house. My buddy then came in the room. He was friends with this girl that I lost my virginity to.
And did she know that he was going to be in the room? Like,
it was their idea. It was their idea
to film it.
And I was like, okay. I was almost afraid to say no.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
It was their idea. They thought it'd be cool. He asked her, and she was like, yeah, whatever. She was obviously more mature sexual than me at that point, and I just kind of went with it because I didn't want to say no, and
because then you like society, like you look, you know, like you're very
aware.
I thought I'd be cool.
Right.
No, exactly.
Right.
Whatever.
And then if you said no, like you think about how people would look at you then.
Yep.
And so
even if inside, like you had a feeling that
Yeah.
you didn't want to do it.
I didn't know what I was feeling, and it was just like I just went with it. And I was like, okay, whatever. Most awkward experience of my life. It's funny. I wasn't even really attracted to the girl, and I did it just because, whatever. And it was awkward. It was uncomfortable. It was, you know, as awkward and uncomfortable as you could think. My buddy's standing there with the camera. We'd start having sex. We'd stop.
You also don't know what you're doing.
I didn't know what I
yet.
was doing, so she helped me out. You know, directed me.
Yeah.
So she directed me, and,
This one, that one, not this
my
one.
buddy's taping it and all this, and then I feel so uncomfortable. And
where's the video now?
it got destroyed.
Okay.
I
Made sure of that.
I think.
I mean, because
I think.
right.
But obviously, right after that, we're in high school. Next day, everyone knows.
Of course.
Everybody
knows.
I'm the guy who just lost his virginity to this girl on camera. And obviously I didn't think about how this was gonna go. You know, kind of fast forward, I walk into biology class, my teacher looks at me and she goes, Ben, really?
No.
Stop.
I said, what?
The teacher
She's
said-
like, oh, I just heard.
Wow.
And she's like, is that true? Yeah. Yeah. I didn't know what to say. And everyone knew. Within a couple days, I was the man, and the girl got tormented.
Absolutely. Can you imagine being the girl that died from the D? That was good. Yeah, everybody knew that the next day too.
Yeah.
So, a nightmare.
I didn't know.
Thank you.
Oh, that's nice.
So,
That's nice.
I'm glad you didn't know.
Right.
but yeah, I mean, it was uncomfortable, and being a sophomore, I was an underclassman, so all the older guys would come up to me, and guys I didn't know who I knew them, and you know, would like dap me up in the hallway.
Weird masculine culture.
And later in the week, me, my buddy, and like 20 guys, most of them who were older than me, went back to my buddy's house, and we all watched it together. And I
yo.
had such mixed feelings watching it.
Of course.
At first, I was nervous, I was excited, I didn't know what to think. And it was just like uncomfortable, and then all of a sudden I'm watching it, and I'm like sitting there with like all these guys in my high school like watching it, and it was interesting. Again, I had mixed feelings. I felt a little uncomfortable. They're judging me, they're judging her, they're judging the whole thing. And that kind of stuck with me throughout high school. You know, obviously it died down after some time, but I just felt like I had to share that because I don't think everyone loses their virginity in a situation.
No,
like
I don't
that.
think everyone. No, I don't
But I
think
also
so.
like that
That's
you acknowledged that
interesting.
it was like a macho thing for you, but you acknowledged that like she had a hard time
Like
with
she had a
that
different
afterwards.
experience than
Yeah.
you did.
And that you weren't really about it. You just were pressured.
Which is pressure.
Yeah.
Just pressure. And like, I mean, I don't know. I was interested also when we were back there and you were saying that you didn't really have to, much to deal with in terms of telling your family like that you were hiding anything sexually or whatever. They were totally fine with it. I didn't know that, and I feel like that's definitely something that a lot of gay people deal with.
Different. Yeah, very.
Mad different, like
Yeah, please share.
yeah, like
I think that most people, even if their family is really accepting, I think that definitely
Still.
internally people have that, you know, hurdle to jump over, which I think a lot of that could be someone's personal identity issues, right? I think that with my family specifically, like my dad, I feel like it's pretty obvious, that it was pretty obvious, like with my family, like, and I think in a lot of LGBT people's cases that their family probably already knows unless they're like very much so in denial. I think my mom had a little bit of a harder time acknowledging it and sort of still does a little bit, but I think that, you know, the way that I am and who I hang out with and the way I identify, it's not like an issue for her. You know what I'm saying? Whereas I think that my dad and my step family, and my dad is remarried, and my stepmom's been in my life for almost 12 years, so it's like she's my mom as well, you know? So they've been like very accepting with me and stuff, so I feel like that has also been obviously more important. Yeah. And
like you've been super
I think
supported.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that, you know, for people like my brother, when I told my brother that I was gay, he was like, obviously you're gay. You know
And
what
you were
I'm
like,
saying?
oh,
I was
great.
like, oh, was it that obvious? But I think that a lot of people in general think that, or have a hard time coming around to accept that other people perceive them as gay, and they feel really bad when someone else tells them like, oh, I kind of knew you were gay, you know, because it's like that
it's a
secret they've
negative
been
thing.
hiding,
It's like
you know.
isn't that like a
Yeah.
like a somehow a cultural thing?
Yeah, well, I think
Assumption.
it's sort of like goes along with the same thing, like as gay being an insult, right? It's like if you're gay, it's a bad thing. So I think that for a lot of people who are closeted as whatever non-heterosexual identity that may be, they have a hard time other people telling them that they are perceived as gay until they are comfortable with that identity, right? Because it takes a little time for everyone, right?
And have a support system.
Right.
I'm sure.
Was sex difficult for you being a gay man when you first started to explore yourself sexually?
I think it's like definitely a really weird experience today with technology, like specifically like for young kids.
Interesting.
When I was a young kid, I think I had initially had, you know, a lot of sexual encounters with women, you know, and because I felt that social pressure, like I would hook up with women, have sex with girls, you know, not vaginal sex, but other forms of sex, you know, digital sex, oral sex, all that good stuff. But, you know, was never really interested in that, but did it because, you know, was pressured to do it by myself, my family, you know, just like the idea of what I thought would be acceptable and what I should do. But when I started acknowledging that I was interested in men, the first thing I had heard about through, you know, just reading things online and stuff, because, you know, we all start watching porn or whatever, you know, how we're socialized sexually.
Undressed. Or that show Undressed.
I was making it.
And I think that a lot of gay youth get into this, like just downloading apps, you know, like Grindr or whatever it is, and like meeting up with strangers. And I was 15 at this time, and it's kind of crazy to think about right now, but the first time I had sex was when I drove to this guy's hotel. This guy who was probably like 35. Just drove to his hotel.
Wait, he was 35?
35, yeah. I was like, sure, I mean, why not? And like, all this time I had been like, I was totally nervous. It was crazy. And the entire, you know, I had been chatting with people on Grindr for like a good amount of time, you know, messaging people, sending them pictures of myself, you know, like who knows what pictures are out there, you know?
Really,
Anyways, but me at fucking 15, you know, what am I doing? So I drive to this guy's hotel, and I get into his apartment, and it was really weird. He was like waiting on the balcony for me, and you know, I was so young, and I said, like, you look lovely this evening, because I didn't know what to say, you know. But this guy's like 30. I look back, I'm like, why would I say that? This guy was ugly. I would never have sex with this guy. He's disgusting.
Oh no.
Anyways, get up there. It happens. I'm like, what the fuck? And you know, at 15. I come from a very Catholic family, you know, and although I think that like they could be accepting in a lot of ways, like I never really learned about like HIV and things like that. Had unprotected sex. First time I had sex with this guy, random 35-year-old. Like who knows what the fuck?
Oh my, you're so lucky that nothing happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, that wasn't the last time that happened. You know, we learned that lesson as we go along. But I think what I'm sort of forgetting what the prompt was here to sort of tie it back in.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
We're talking. It's cool.
I think it's important to note that like you had to seek it in such an unconventional way than us, because it's like less
right, and
open
I think that,
and less accepted. Like, you know, you
and I think that
might
there's
not
a
have had
lot
more gay youth at your school,
right,
and that.
I think that generally in high school too, like maybe people have like clandestine experiences, right, or you know, they may have a homosexual experience, and that just happens between friends. Like that has definitely happened with me and other friends. So I'm sure that, you know, that's definitely an outlet or a way for gay people to have sex or hook up or whatever. But I think that in general, because that is so clandestine and so
hidden,
not talked about, right? It's like no one's gonna come out and say, let's hook up, right? It's like we're doubting until your dick is in my mouth. You know what I'm saying?
Do you think times have changed at all? Like,
I think well,
Like
I grew up
for,
in New
like,
York
the young-
City.
yeah.
I think it depends where you are. I went to high school in Shelton, Connecticut. It's very suburban. So I think in rural and suburban America, it's very much so different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, like New York City, I think all my friends, I went to a summer camp my whole life, where I met Vicky. All my friends were always from the city. And, you know, much more progressive. You know, I feel like they had friends that identified as gay, whereas I sort of was shocked when people would even mention gay, because it was like, oh my God, no, wait, what?
Right.
You know, because it was like, in my high school, it was like gay was that one kid who was on the cheerleading squad, and then all these other closeted kids. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it wasn't something that people like celebrated or identified with. But in urban America, I feel like that's very different.
I have a question for you, because I feel like this could be a stereotype, but I'm not 100% sure.
That's okay,
so,
go for it.
Okay. I have several gay friends, and they have similar stories of their first experience being when they're super young, and this guy is like way older than them.
Yeah.
That's mad typical? Or
I mean, I think it could be typical, definitely. Like for me, the first person I had sex with was way above my age, you know, and I think that's because, you know, maybe I was a little bit stupid, wasn't educated on sex at all, right?
But it's
And
because
just
you
was
had
like
to search
horny
right, you just
on
search
this
outside.
app.
You were,
Like,
you were
right.
otherized.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my sexual socialization happened via internet and via Grindr and via, you know what I'm saying, which is like good and bad, right? Until individuals may develop sort of their sexual identity or any sort of, I guess, different ideas than the typical dominant heterosexist culture, right? That they then may be able to take those steps to experience non-heterosexual things, right? Or so it's also internal and external, right? It's like how much inside of you is pushing you to do that, and how much is keeping you away from that. And it's like
Right.
when one supersedes the other is when that occurs.
You okay
It just,
over
yeah,
there?
I'm just thinking,
You're like
because
getting ahead.
Yeah, you're making me think, because
Okay.
like my identity, my sexual identity has been in flux, as we can imagine, but because my voice is deep and I'm tall and I'm naturally muscular, people have always perceived me as a lesbian, always, right? And that's a thing that over time I inevitably took as part of my identity. I was like, all right, well, I could be whatever you want me to be. Yeah. I could be more of a chameleon, it's fine. And so out of that preconceived notion from other people onto me, which I don't even know if I liked girls actually, but I just went down that pathway because that was what people expected of me.
You are working and traveling around the world for a year. That's the simplest thing. Sure. It is not a vacation.
I think what Dina said about like, okay, it's not a vacation, it looks like a vacation to the untrained eye.
Yeah.
You see people like, I'm convinced that there wasn't much work going on. Right. And that obviously wasn't the case.
Right, but
yeah,
how would you know that?
When I'm sitting in a cubicle and my friend is putting up pictures from Vietnam riding an elephant,
Like,
I'm going, bullshit, he's not working.
Exactly.
Obviously, I see the benefits of doing this. I mean, it sounds like a great opportunity, but how do you think you educate, let's call it traditional employers, to give people this opportunity?
If you don't do your work, you should be fired.
Period. Whether you're here or there.
Whether you're here or there. And it's like, if you don't have a way to figure out if people are doing their work,
then you need to reassess how you manage.
Because the whole idea of work is a toil, and it shouldn't be from some points of view. And it shouldn't be combined with fun or pleasure or even satisfaction. It should be work, the four-letter word.
So we just wrapped our convo and it was excellent. We hope you liked it. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow YouTube, Patreon, Instagram, Facebook. And yes, you'll see this ending a lot because who doesn't love a little consistency, and we wanted to do it one time, so let's do it.